If there was no other benefit to keto, none of these other things that I've talked about, this would be the one thing, this would be one thing that makes it all worth it. Today I want to take off my keto coaching hat and just have a conversation with you. I want to share with you 12 things that I've experienced personally in doing keto for the last 4 years. And it's actually been a little more than 4 years. I started keto in June of 2018. Now, to be clear, I was very strict nutritional keto for the first year and a half. And what that means for me is no more than 25 net carbs per day. And I did not waver, not even during the holidays. Since that time, I've been keto probably about 80 to 90% of the time. I don't worry about being in ketosis all of the time. I don't stress about that. I go off it once in a while, and every once in a while I cycle in carbs. But for the most part, I've been keto for about 80 to 90% of the time in a given year. When I first heard about keto, I thought it was one of the dumbest things I'd ever heard. You know, high fat, low carb. I was doing a high carb, low fat diet at the time. I just thought keto was another fad diet. I didn't think it was healthy. I didn't think, anyone should do it. At the time, I was trying to become an ultramarathon runner because I had this goal of wanting to run the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim. I went to go do it, and I ran into some serious trouble. The rangers actually stopped me as I was coming back across. They kept me overnight for observation. They said my body was shutting down, and that if I tried to continue, that most likely it would have resulted in a helicopter ride out of there. So it was a little bit scary, but more than that, I was frustrated, I was defeated, and that kind of left me with an open mind. I made a video about that. I posted it on my other channel. And after that, a very experienced ultramarathon runner who had a lot of experience in the Grand Canyon reached out to me and said, hey, I watched your video. I think you should try keto. I think you should try a low carb approach to this. And I thought, wow, really? So I decided to try it. And I'm going to share with you 12 things. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put chapters so you can jump around if you want to. I'm going to save my very favorite one for the end. But let's start with number one. Number one, the first thing I experienced was the keto flu. I didn't know what I was doing, and I had heard about that. Again, this is back in 2018. There wasn't a ton of information out there about keto like there is now. And I had heard about it. I knew that it could happen, but I was not prepared for how bad I would feel. I felt terrible. I had fatigue, I had headaches, I was even nauseous, and it was not fun, but I heard that it goes away. I had heard that you just get through that, and then after that, it's much better. And so I just kind of gutted my way through it. I didn't know that you don't have to experience the keto flu. I didn't know that all I had to do was increase salt, increase electrolytes, and then you could go through that transition phase. It's the keto adaptation phase, and there's a lot of things happening during that time, but I just pushed my way through, and it was brutal. But I was able to get through it. The only way I was able to get through it is because I had heard that it gets better, and it did get better. So the rest of these that I'm going to talk about, I would classify the unexpected benefits of a ketogenic diet. It's because I didn't know what to expect. I was trying to improve my running. My goal was to become fat adapted, but so many things happened that I just didn't expect. I didn't know. I didn't realize were going to be benefits from going keto. And the first one is, I lost weight. Big surprise, right? You lost weight. Wow. You know what I mean? Like most people I recognize do keto because they want to lose weight. Well, for me, I thought, well, maybe I'll lose weight. I didn't believe that I would. I had been running, doing a lot of running, and I believed that I had lost 10 pounds just from doing the running, but I was stuck. I had a dad bod, and I'll admit that there were times I thought, man, am I ever going to lose this belly? My friend Carl and I would be running on a trail, and we would see this very fit, very lean, very experienced trail runner just float on past us. And Carl would say, there goes a real trail runner. And we were like, and I thought in the back of my mind, why don't we look like that? We've been doing a lot of running. At the time, we were doing every single week for a period of time, we were running a marathon every Saturday. And we still, kind of looked the same. I was thinking, how do people get like that? Meanwhile, I started keto. And honestly, I thought, well, maybe I'll lose a little bit of weight. Maybe I'll lose 5 pounds. And I didn't believe that would happen, but it did. And it did. It happened in a big way. I lost 20 pounds in the first 8 weeks. I still was in disbelief the entire time. I'd step on the scale, there's another 2 pounds. I'd step on the scale every week, and every week the scale was decreasing. I want to qualify that I'd already been doing the running and I wasn't losing the weight, because I could see some people saying, oh, well, you're an ultramarathon runner. And I'm not even really that good at ultramarathons. I enjoy it, and I was doing that specifically because I wanted to improve my time at the Grand Canyon. But I was already doing all that, and I wasn't losing weight. But once I switched to keto, all of a sudden the weight just started falling off. What that's done for me is that's made it possible for me to go up and down hills a lot better. So it turned out to be a benefit. So I started right around 178. I was about 178, 179 pounds, and I landed right around 147. Now I'm about 145. So you get an idea of what kind of weight loss happened. Here's a picture of my wife and I at our favorite restaurant, The Keg, right? And I look at that picture now and I think, wow, I wasn't just overweight, I was fat. And if you would have told me back then, dude, you're overweight, you need to lose some weight, I would have been, no, I'm not. I would have denied it, and I would have argued it. I was in denial. Here's another picture, again, with my wife and I. I look at this picture, I think, wow, was I really that overweight? I don't think I was obese, but I could see very clearly I was overweight, and I didn't even realize it. The next one was also unexpected, and that is my hunger levels completely leveled out. I used to get hangry, like angry, hungry every single day. I would come home from work, I would drive home and just be irritable and angry, and not just because of the traffic, but because I was hungry, and the first thing I needed to do was eat something. The first thing I needed to do in the morning was eat something, because I'd wake up with a stomach ache, I had these hunger pains, and I just had to eat. And I actually started to feel a little insecure if I didn't have food available to me. Like if I didn't have it there within easy reach, I started feeling anxious because I needed to eat, and whenever I'd feel that way, I would just eat. So I was snacking all the time, I was eating meals all the time, probably 6 meals if you include snacks every day. Well, that all changed. It was over a period of time, I want to say probably for 3 or 4 weeks or so, the hunger levels just mellowed out. And I have not been hangry since. It's unbelievable. It's awesome. I love it that I can go without food, particularly if I'm doing intermittent fasting. I can go without food and not be hungry, not be irritable, not have that feeling of insecurity of not having food. It's actually been very freeing. So that's number 3. Number 4 was, and you've heard of this before probably, more mental clarity. I would get to a point where sometime in the afternoon, like around 2 or 3 o'clock, it was really hard for me to concentrate. And once I started doing keto, all of a sudden that changed. So I was able to be more functional in the afternoons. And that was really, really cool, because I was starting to kind of wonder what is going on. Number 5 was improved memory. Okay, now I saw a modest improvement in memory. It's been very frustrating for me as I've gotten older, as my memory has declined a little bit. And the most frustrating thing is I have a hard time remembering names. I will remember your face forever, but your name? I can meet people and then 5 minutes later, I'm like, what was their name? And that has gotten a little bit better, but my memory in general improved. It wasn't like significant, but it was noticeable, and that is something that I'm very happy about. Number 6 goes along with this mental clarity that I was talking about. I no longer had an afternoon crash, right? I would eat lunch, come back to work, and oh man, that crash in the afternoon, it was terrible. So I was really trying to squeeze as much of my day into the morning and before lunch, and then just get through the afternoon, suffer through it, because I would crash and crash hard. It got to a point where I was really starting to question, am I going to be able to keep doing this? But that all got better. And doing keto, I got better. There was no more afternoon crash. Number 7, here's another one that I wasn't expecting. I started sleeping better. I used to struggle with insomnia. I had a lot of problems sleeping. Insomnia was a regular thing, and that made it very difficult to function throughout the day as well. So those of you that have ever had sleep issues, you know what I'm talking about. It's really frustrating. That improved significantly to a point where I don't worry about sleep anymore. I sleep so much better now than I did then. Okay, so we're getting into some good ones now. Number 8, and this one is kind of embarrassing, but I need to talk about it because because, if you're dealing with it, then it's probably, you know what I'm talking about, right? When I was 19 years old, I was mountain biking in the mountains in Utah at a place called American Fork Canyon. And I ran out of water. I decided, okay, I'm thirsty, I need some water, and I drank out of the river. And, it was so good. It's some of the best water I ever tasted. Well, a little bit later, about a week after that, I started having gut issues. And when I mean gut issues, I'm talking about the kind you don't want to mention, right? I'm talking about diarrhea. Hershey squirts, the trots, the runs, whatever you want to call it, diarrhea. And then I thought back, wondering why is this happening? Maybe I'm sick. And then I remembered I drank water out of that river. And I thought, oh no, I've got probably Giardia, some sort of waterborne pathogen like that. And I went to the doctor. The doctor did some tests, took some samples. That was fun. And couldn't find anything. Ruled that out. It's like, okay, great. But the problem was the diarrhea kept on persisting. And it was really starting to make me worry. So I went back to the doctor. And that began a series of tests, a series of very uncomfortable invasive procedures, colonoscopies, sigmoidoscopy, back and forth, doctor visits and taking samples and stuff like that, or providing samples. And that's just not fun. It's kind of a little bit demeaning. You poop in a thing, a container, and then you take it, here you go. They did all this and they couldn't figure out why. They ruled out colitis, they ruled out a bunch of different things, and came back and the doctor said, well, you've got something called IBS. I said, okay, well, what's that? Irritable bowel syndrome. Well, okay, what does that mean? Spastic colon. Can we speak words that we all understand? Like, what is that? What is that? He said, well, when you're nervous, you have diarrhea. Oh, okay, so don't get nervous? And the reality is it was confusing because I was having diarrhea even when I wasn't nervous or having some sort of anxiety or anything like that. I would have diarrhea. This went on for years and years and years. For someone who doesn't like public restrooms, it's not fun. Imagine, having diarrhea not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 5 and 6 times per day. Sitting in a meeting and you're uncomfortable, you have to excuse yourself. You're worried about a long drive because you're gonna have to pull over and use another public restroom. Or you go to a public restroom and you're hoping that people aren't gonna be in there because you're not gonna be able to control it. And you're worried that this might be noisy. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's very uncomfortable. If you have dealt with this, you know what I'm talking about. So what this is all leading up to. Going keto completely cured me of IBS. This mysterious disease of diarrhea went away. I don't have it anymore. I am so grateful that I've been able to resolve that issue that the doctors couldn't. The doctors just said, okay, it's IBS, that you just got to deal with it. Go take some Metamucil. I will say that the Metamucil did help a little bit, but nothing like changing my diet completely. So for those of you that are experiencing that, you may want to consider keto. It's been a game changer for me. So the next one is one that's very important to me, and it's something I haven't talked about on this channel yet, but it has to do with depression. The first time I ever remember feeling depressed was when I was a freshman in high school. I remember very clearly. I remember I was walking to one of my classes. It was late in the afternoon. I can see the hallway. I can see my surroundings. I can remember vividly. And I can remember feeling this overwhelming darkness all around me. I felt like I was sinking. I felt like I was in a black hole. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. I was suffocating. This is in broad daylight. Broad daylight, I'm feeling this way. And remember feeling very confused, thinking, why am I so sad? Why do I feel this way? I couldn't think of any reason to feel that way. And I knew it wasn't just because I was tired of school. I knew it was something more than that. It was very, very heavy. And I suffered through this. I didn't say anything. I kept it quiet for a long time. That's obviously not the best thing to do. But I remember one day, I finally went to the doctor. This was a few years after that experience. I went to the doctor, and I was 18 years old. I'm sitting in front of the doctor. He did this checkout, he did a checkup, and he sat me down. He said, Jared, I can't find anything wrong with you. And I started arguing with him, and he said, he grabbed me by the shoulder. He said, I'm not saying there isn't anything wrong with you. I'm just saying that I can't find anything wrong with you physically. What I would recommend is you go talk to a psychologist. I remember that. I remember that experience. I'm thinking, the doctor can't figure this out. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And it's a very common thing for depression, is feeling like you're the only one that is, that somehow the world is against you, and you're the only one that's dealing with these horrible feelings. I remember laying on my bed in my room and just not wanting to do anything, not even wanting to breathe. And then my dad coming into the room and telling him, the doctor says I need to go to a psychologist. I don't want anyone to know. Back then, when I was growing up, mental illness was very much a stigma. And it was embarrassing. And again, I thought there was something wrong with me, and I was somehow different than everybody else. I was beginning to believe that there was no way to fix it. This went on for years and years and years. And to be clear, it wasn't 100% of the time. I wasn't feeling depressed 100% of the time, but it would come in waves, kind of like the ocean. The most difficult times, the most challenging were times that you go through your list. Finances are good, career is good, relationships are good, kids are good, everything's good. My hobbies are good, everything's great, we're doing well. Why do I feel this way? Those were the times that were the most, unexplainable, the most difficult. And I learned that I just had to function. I just had to keep going, keep trying, get through it, and I would just wait. And somehow the wave of depression would pass. And I remember sitting in front of a psychiatrist. The very first thing he wanted to do was prescribe medication. I'm not against medication. I have good friends that have struggled with depression, and they do medication. They swear by it. It helps them very much so. I'm not against it at all. I'm not saying no one should do that. But for me, I felt like, no, I don't want to do that yet. I want to try everything that I possibly can to resolve this on my own without medication. So that kind of became my quest. There was a lot of different things that I looked into. And over time, I had some mild amounts of success. But once I changed my diet, over time, I began to notice, I feel brighter on the inside. I feel lighter. I feel less of these bouts of depression. It's hard to describe a less emotional heaviness. The waves of depression were fewer and further between, and not nearly as pronounced. What I'm telling you is that I found my solution. Keto has nearly completely resolved my issues with depression, completely healed me from depression. When I say nearly completely, I should say that I still have bouts of depression every once in a while, but they're not nearly as deep, and they don't last nearly as long, and usually they're situational. Right, there's some sort of stress at work that's very heavy, or recently my dad was diagnosed with bone cancer, and that was challenging news to hear. My mother-in-law passed away due to COVID. That was that kind of brought on a little bit of depression, but it was so much more manageable. And I started to realize that I could grieve, I could have these normal feelings that don't turn into depression. If there was no other benefit to keto, none of these other things that I've talked about, this would be one thing that makes it all worth it. A reason to do keto for me in and of itself. And to stay. And that's the reason why I'm never going back. I am never, ever going back to the way I was eating before. I wish I could tell you, I wish I could explain how much better my life is, how much better I feel following a ketogenic lifestyle. And that brings us to number 10, reduced inflammation. So when it comes to this, I'm talking about aches and pains throughout the day. I used to take 800 to 2,000 milligrams of ibuprofen every single day. I had so many aches and pains. I would wake up in the morning, aches and pains. In the afternoon, oh man, my joints would hurt, my neck would hurt, my back would hurt, my knees would hurt, my hips would hurt, just my elbows would hurt. I was in pain. And so I would take ibuprofen. And I kept taking it and taking it. I knew that it couldn't be good, but I didn't want to listen. I didn't want someone to say, that's not good for you. I already knew it wasn't good for me. I didn't want to look at the research. I didn't want to find out how bad that really, really is. I know now, but back then it didn't matter. Back then I didn't care because all I wanted to do was feel better. I remember sitting there at work looking out the window at my desk and thinking, this is my lot in life. I'm doomed to feel this way, right? I thought this is like part of getting older. This is just what happens. This is how you feel when you get older. I'd never really worried about that before, but now I'm getting older. I thought, it's just going to get worse? Is it just going to get worse from here? I remember thinking, I don't want this. I don't want this. If this is what getting older is going to be, I don't want this. I felt so terrible. I never had the energy to do the things that I wanted to do. Never had the interest. I'd go to work, do my job, feel terrible, especially in the afternoons, and then come home and be worn out, tired, and achy, and not really want to do anything. And I thought, man, this is the drudgery of my life, and it's only going to get worse. To give you an idea of how bad it was, I used to panic. Like if I didn't have some ibuprofen within reach, I used to kind of feel this panicky feeling, like I'd run out and be like, oh no, and then I would start bumming it off of other people in the office, or I'd be like, okay, I gotta go, and I'd go across the street to the grocery store to buy some. Or if I'm out on the trail and I would reach for the bag of ibuprofen in my running vest and find, oh no, I forgot my ibuprofen. But in going keto, all that stuff started getting better. So much so, I stopped worrying about it, and I stopped carrying it on my trail runs. Until later, my son and I went on this big hike in the Grand Canyon and went down to the bottom and back up again. And he's in pretty good shape. He goes to the gym, but he doesn't hike and he doesn't run. And so we're coming out of the canyon and he's feeling these aches and pains. It's really hurting his knee and his hip were hurting. And then I reached for the ibuprofen and it wasn't there. So for that reason, I started carrying it again. But the improvement has been so profound, has been so good, that I could probably count in the last 4.5 years, I could probably count on one hand how many times I've taken ibuprofen or some other sort of painkiller. And it's always been situational, whether I had an injury and I was, having a hard time bearing the pain, or I was sick, like when I had COVID and got a headache or my body was aching from a fever or something like that. That's kind of like an appropriate time to use that stuff. It shouldn't be on a daily basis. And I feel so much better. I feel so much better. It's all because of keto. For me, again, that's one more reason, a reason enough just for that to do keto, or at least consider doing keto, because if you can help you with that, and it absolutely helped me with that, man, that's another reason why I'm never going to go back to the way I was eating before. The number 11, speaking of being sick, I don't get sick as much as I used to. I used to very reliably get bronchitis, sinusitis, or pneumonia every year, sometimes twice a year. It would be like clockwork. I would just get it in the fall and the winter, and sometimes even in the spring. And it was bad. It would last for a couple of weeks. I had fever, all these symptoms. It was terrible. And I would get other colds and flus and things like that on a regular basis. Now, while I've been keto, that has significantly improved. I don't get sick nearly as often. And when I do, I can't even remember the last time I had bronchitis. I can't remember the last time I had a sinus infection. I can't remember the last time I had pneumonia. Isn't it weird to even say that? Pneumonia? You have to get it almost every year? That's just odd. right? But now I can say, I don't get sick as often, and when I do, I do get sick, but when I do, it is not nearly as long and it's not nearly as pronounced, and I get better sooner. That's pretty cool. So we've gone all this way and all these awesome things, but it gets even better. My favorite one out of all of these, and it's pretty hard to top some of these ones that I've mentioned, right? And I started noticing this several months into my keto journey, and that is, I feel better. I feel younger. And I started thinking about it, remembering, and back in those times where I was sitting there achy and sitting there, feeling brain fog and having that fatigue and doing whatever I was doing and feeling like, oh man, is this what getting older is going to be? And then I started realizing I don't feel any of that stuff anymore. And I realized I feel younger than I did when I was in my mid-40s. And now I actually have data that shows you don't just feel that way, you actually are younger. I went to this place called Inside Tracker. You can do blood work, you send it to them, and they analyze it, and they tell you what your biological age is. So my chronological age, the number of birthdays I've had, is 51. I know some people say, oh, you look way older than that. There's nothing I can do about that. But what's important to me is my blood results say that I'm actually 42. Keto has reversed my age by 9 years, right? My inner age is 9 years younger than my chronological age. Honestly, I can't put a price on that. I feel awesome. I feel so much better than I thought I was going to feel. I feel better than I was, than I felt in my mid-40s, right? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I feel so much better than I did then. And at a time when I thought, oh, my life is over, my life of doing great things, my life of making a difference, making a contribution. I thought that was over. I was just, starting to resign myself to this downhill decline. I didn't know that I could dramatically change that just by changing my diet. Exercise has a big part of that, right? But I was already exercising on a regular basis, and changing my diet changed all of these different things. And to top it off, it's made me younger on the inside. So having said that, it has created an interest in going down this longevity, health span, lifespan path. I've started to make some videos about that, like different supplements you can take and things like that. I'm going to keep going that direction and keep talking about anti-aging, longevity, lifespan, those kinds of topics on this channel. I'm going to keep talking about keto. I'm going to keep talking about a lot of different health, fitness, lifestyle, and wellness types of topics. I think that keto goes hand in hand with some of those things very, very well. At least that's been my experience. So after doing all of these things and having all of these different results and going back to this hesitancy I had, this state of ignorance that I was in previously, where I thought I was following a good diet, where I thought that I was eating clean, and come full circle to doing keto and having all these benefits, I found myself just learning and learning and learning. I'm watching videos every day. I'm reading books, realizing that, people need to know about this. These are really good things that people should hear about. I like to help people, and I saw that Dr. Berg does this keto coaching course. You can become a certified keto coach. It was like a college course on keto, and then I started helping people. And it was very, very awesome. But then I realized I had this handful of clients. Then I realized, I don't have very much time. I still have a day job. This is something I do. It's my passion project, so to speak, right? I have only so many hours in the day, and I can only work with so many people one-on-one. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do YouTube. Maybe I can help more people. And that's where we are now. If you have been doing keto for any length of time, whether you're just starting or you've been doing it for many years, a lot of people have been doing keto way longer than I have. If you could share your experience down below, tell me if any of these things sound familiar to you. Tell me if there's things that you've experienced that I haven't mentioned. Tell me, if there's something that you're hoping keto would do for you. Whatever it is that you want to share, please put that in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.